Welcome to A Better HR Business, the podcast that looks at how HR consultants and HR tech firms grow their businesses and how they help their employers to get the best out of their people. Remember, for show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Okay, let's get started.
Hello, thanks for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation with Louise Bijesse. Louise is the founder and CEO of UpTalent Consulting, an amazing HR business in beautiful North Carolina. So we're going to get into the business in just a moment. But firstly, Louise, thank you very much for joining me today.
I'm really excited about this, Ben. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you along. Yeah. And how is everything in sunny North Carolina at the moment?
A bit rainy today, but
Awesome.
reasonably warm at 55 degrees.
Right. So yeah, looking forward to learning about UpTalent Consulting. Can you give us a brief overview of what the business does?
Certainly. We're a global boutique consulting company that focuses on HR solutions and processes for both startups and rapidly growing companies. And we've been assisting founders and leaders put into place the best people, processes, and tools. We do this by fostering collaboration and innovation, ensuring that we really understand the needs of the business and support our clients to help them grow their businesses.
Yeah. Now, there are so many different challenges that businesses face on the HR side of things. What are the kinds of HR problems and challenges you're seeing employees having to deal with at the moment?
And I'll focus more on startups and growth stage companies,
Yep.
because if you look at all different companies, there's a lot of different
Yeah,
challenges.
exactly.
But it's really HR founders are focused on their business, coming up with that idea, that concept, creating that viable product or the service or maybe an IT platform. They're learning the industry if they don't really know it that well, because some of them do start up businesses without understanding the industry. Sometimes they're bringing in talent, which is very expensive, to give them more of a subject matter expert in that line of business, in that area. They talk to their customers and they try to understand their customers' view. And they also spend a lot of time initially operating their business. But oops, they're not spending any time on HR. So they don't have HR technology. They don't have systems or processes in place. They have inconsistent hiring practices and lack of goals and KPIs. The ramifications of maybe opening up in another state or even country, they don't understand that, and that there might be nuances or differences in the laws that they have to follow. And a rapidly growing company also has challenges as they try to grow out their teams, maybe adding employee stock options, and undergoing any type of organizational change, or maybe a strategy reset for the business.
Absolutely. I can sort of picture some of those challenges, certainly in the startup stage. Most CEOs, founders, co-founders, they'll go to a lawyer to get the employment contract because they were told to do that at some business course. So they might have that part, but after that, it's pretty empty in the cupboard. There's very few policies, procedures, nothing in terms of best practice. And that's okay. That's not their area of expertise, but there are big gaps there. And as you say, when they go into the growth phase, what started out as a group of people in one room all hacking away on computers or whatever is built out into larger teams. And suddenly you've got line managers and managers, and where's the career progression and the employee benefits, keeping up with market conditions and stuff. So there's all sorts of challenges. If they get those sort of things wrong, or if they're not getting them right, what are the ramifications for the businesses that you see?
Well, by not having a focus on HR, there are some negative impacts to the company and to its people. And it could be, employee conflict that could cause that. It could have lack of recognition for the employees, inadequate training, poor team building, which, then what will happen is you can have high turnover rates for a company. You can also have inefficient hiring process. You can break laws by paying somebody not according to the contract. Interesting, you mentioned about the employment contract. Sometimes a founder will just go and Google something and use it. And so we have to fix that. And then you can go lost business, because if you have high turnover, then you can lose your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Clients or customers unhappy because processes have changed without them knowing because someone's left and not told the next person or whatever it may be. So, what are the ways that you've seen that companies try to get around that prevent these HR problems from happening, or how do they try to solve these issues?
Well, I said before about Googling, they'll just go
Mhm.
and Google it,
Yep.
right? They might try to get it done themselves. They might guess on the answers and try to do it, wing it. They could have their, like maybe even an admin or something do it, or somebody that's in operations that should be really focusing on the business versus doing HR. And then they're not an HR professional. And it's taking away from their business. They can go to an attorney and try to get it done. They're going to spend a lot of money. They can hire an HR staff, but typically they don't have enough capital initially to be able to bring in somebody full time. Or they can bring in an HR consultant, such as my company.
I would highly recommend that. And then the one before that is hiring a full-time HR person. What I've seen is that if they're trying to grow quickly and hiring quickly, they tend to focus more on talent acquisition, i.e., get a recruiter in-house to do that. And then they try and get the recruiter to do the HR stuff. They go, "Ugh, A, I'm just so busy interviewing people, get screening CVs and stuff. And B, I'm not actually trained or I haven't done the HR stuff before. So if you want it done properly, I'm not so sure. So yeah, so the Google, get it done in-house, but not so well, or adding admin or time to the various delays that can cause. So yeah, I can see how that can go wrong. And tell us about UpTalent Consulting. We've heard a little bit about what you guys do. How would you say you're different to some of those options that we described earlier?
Well, we would come in initially and do really a performing needs analysis to understand what the business needs. It could be that they need more focus on talent acquisition because they did bring in a recruiter and they're hiring people, but then they're not onboarding people. They're not taking care of and they're not maintaining all those employee records. And then the person starts and who's collecting, and making sure that person's authorized to work in the United States or somewhere else. And then what about that orientation and training for that individual when you're bringing them on board? And then who's going to engage them and ensure that they're in performance and come up with their goals, their KPIs. So all that, it's not just talent. Hiring is part of talent acquisition. It's really that whole spectrum. But as I said before, we'd perform a needs analysis to see what the company needs, what our client needs. We'd provide our recommendations, and that's based on a collaboration with our client. We'd have that conversation, we'd work on them and look at what their strategic planning is for their business and mirror the HR planning with their business planning and work it into their business roadmap because the business roadmap really needs to have that people component. And we'll translate the business plans and have HR plans. We define the leader roles. We look at the job descriptions. As I said before, we look at goals, KPIs, key performance indicators. We'd establish company policies and assist with handbooks to ensure that there is consistent, not just hiring practices, but how they're treating their employees. And then making sure that our clients are in compliance with the ever-changing local and state regs and even the country regs. They're always changing. So staying up to date on what's happening now and then what's coming in 2023 and beyond.
Mm, absolutely. I'm an Aussie, but I obviously deal with the US all the time. But you guys are crazy with your laws and regulations, states and counties and federal laws. I think a business would be crazy not to seek expert advice on implementing compliance measures and things like that, but just to have that ongoing support to feel confident. I think you can bed things down and have procedures and contracts and documents and stuff, but things change. And also, are you following best practice? So for me, it makes sense to get external support to give you that eye on the wider horizon. Is that a fair call?
It is absolutely a fair call, but then also remembering the people component of it and
Yeah.
ensuring that while you're creating these policies, handbooks, and making sure that you're up on laws, but also making sure that everything gets communicated to the team members, from the founders all the way to the leadership team and then the employees.
Yeah. Great. So you've described what UpTalent Consulting does. And I'm curious because I was doing a bit of reading and I believe you've got a bit of a multi-prong approach to the way you help clients. Can you describe that multi-pronged approach?
Absolutely, Ben. We look at our startup companies really from getting an understanding of the business, looking at technology, looking at the company review. We go through and look at the structure for today and for tomorrow. We look at how they're handling their recruiting, candidate care, and onboarding right now, and then how benefits and compensation is needed to bring those people on. And then the second area that we really focus on is our HR review for rapidly growing companies. It's really that focus being there when they're ready to make that jump from that initial startup. And now they're a few years into their business and they're saying, wow, we're growing. We don't have an HR department. We will come in, really take a clean sheet of paper and establish that HR department for them. So again, looking at the company, looking at their technology, giving recommendations for technology, be it an applicant tracking system, be it an HRIS system, and then coming in there and even go through the review of vendors and then implementation of a system. Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, big
I love that
component,
book.
ensuring that you have the right people on the bus. So looking at where you have those individuals, what they're doing, how their performance is, and are they sitting in that right seat on the bus, or do you need to move them over to another seat? Or maybe they're not on the right bus. So, looking at the recruiting strategy, is there a recruiting strategy? Are there recruiting systems? How can we help with that? And then could we source and hire the in-house recruiting team if we find that that is needed? And then building out the internal succession planning. So what's the next step? What's the next seat that the leaders of the company are going to go into? And then offer retained leadership search if necessary. And then also recruiter development and training for when that recruiting team is in place.
So that third pillar you were describing of the talent acquisition side is really interesting because I know you're an HR expert, but you also have quite a strong history in talent acquisition recruitment. Is that right? And how is that connected?
Yes. So in my career, I've worked in leadership roles in both in HR and in talent acquisition for various different companies, including healthcare and hospitality and financial services. It's really about having that right hire right from the beginning, that if you have the right people in your business, you're hiring the right people, it makes everything else in HR go so much smoother. And
That's for
it
sure.
helps with retention.
So if you get the right people in, they're happier, they're more productive, they stay, they refer in other friends and colleagues who are similarly motivated and so on. So yeah, I think it has a huge impact. Absolutely. I've really enjoyed learning about UpTalent Consulting. If people want to learn more about you or UpTalent Consulting, what should they do next?
Well, to learn more about our services, they can visit our website, uptalentconsulting.com. Here they can also book a time for a complimentary discovery consulting session. Or if they just want to chat with me and learn a little bit more about my business, happy to have that conversation with them. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. As HR professionals, it is so important for all of us to network together and to collaborate with each other. So feel free, anybody, to drop me a line.
Very good. Yeah, just call out the website again for listeners on the go.
UpTalentConsulting.com.
Easy enough. Excellent. All right. Well, we will have that link in the show notes. So Louise, thank you very much for sharing your business story. And yeah, I wish you all the best for UpTalent Consulting.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us today on A Better HR Business, the podcast that explores the world of HR consulting and HR tech businesses. For show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Remember to subscribe and share the show with any friends who are busy growing a HR business. Thanks and see you next time.